So we're going to talk a little bit about normal sleep, sleep requirements. So one of the most common questions I get is, how much sleep do I really have to have? And so we're going to talk about that. Some sleep disruptors. So what are some classifications of things and items that may be disrupting your sleep that you may not even have thought of, could be a disruptor to the quality of sleep that you're getting. So we're going to talk about those things, as well as what can you do to get good night's sleep. So I don't like to just talk about the negatives. What are the bad things or what are you having to avoid? But what are some of the things that you can do to actually promote your sleep and get a good night's sleep and improve the quality of your sleep overall? Okay, so diving right in, how does sleep work? So really what we're talking about here, and what I want you to take home from this slide, is that sleep is not just go to sleep, stay asleep, wake up. It's actually a cycle. So you're going to go from deeper sleep, light sleep, into deeper sleep, and then up into lighter sleep again. And you'll cycle in and out of that deep sleep as you move throughout the night. This red line is really sort of telling you primarily what happens. So you'll go from, well, in a good pattern, right? So what this would be the ideal if we were looking for it. You'd go from awake down into deep sleep. Within the first hour, you start coming back up into lighter sleep. So now you're in REM sleep. So that's where you're getting some of those dreams. So you're dreaming in here in REM sleep. About hour 2, you're dropping back down and getting some more deep sleep. Then you come back up again, get some more REM. So you can see it's normal that you will be moving throughout this cycle as you go through the night. And then around 7.5 to 8 hours, you wake up refreshed and ready to do your day. Unfortunately, what happens is we see more commonly this poor sleep or dotted line. So you try to go to bed, but you can't quite fall asleep. 30 minutes, 60 minutes sometimes. You finally fall asleep. You fall asleep, but you don't really get down into the deep sleep that we're wanting because you're in a hyper aroused state. And so it really doesn't let you fall deeply asleep. So you wake back up, you might get some dreaming in here, go back, still quite not very deep sleep. You wake up, you're completely awake. So you see here, you're not really coming completely awake. Although it is pretty common for you to come completely awake at about 2.5 hours to need to go to the bathroom. And that has to do with fluid shifts and things. But so you wake up, and actually with this one, what I would say is most commonly, this is a prolonged period of time. So this might be another hour or so that people are awake at this time. And that becomes really frustrating because people will say, well, I sleep about 4 hours and then I wake up and then I can't get back to sleep. So this is if you were trying to go back to sleep, you might actually fall back to sleep a little bit. So you're just sort of bouncing in and out of sleep, but not really getting down into the deep sleep. So typically we have nightly patterns that average about 90 to 120 minutes each cycle. So that's an important thing for you to think about, because if you have time to be able to figure out how much sleep can you have. So if your time constraints are such that you can't get 8 hours at one time, maybe you've got a new baby in the house and it's waking you up after 2 or 3 hours, then you need to be able to know, okay, if I can get 2 hours, or if I can get 3 hours, that's actually 2 full sleep cycles. Excuse me, 2 full sleep cycles. And so that's a good thing. You're getting, what that means is you're getting all the way from this wake sleep down into your non-REM sleep. You're coming back up and then you're waking up. That's okay. But if you could get 3 hours and you're getting down, you're getting back up. So you're getting 2 full sleep cycles to get information and restorative sleep all the way through. This is another graphic that I like to show people about what sort of happens in those sleep cycles, across those sleep cycles. What is the primary work that your body is doing during that time? Your body and your mind is doing during that time? Because we learned a long time ago that sleep is not an inactive state. It's not something that we just get bored and so we do it and nothing happens. Everything shuts down. In fact, it's really more about shifting activity. So you do certain kinds of activities when you're awake, and you can do certain kinds of activities that really primarily can only happen while you're sleeping. There's a lot of crossover, but I like to show this slide to be able to sort of illustrate really what is the primary work that your body and your mind is doing during sleep. So the first couple of cycles, so 90 minutes, 90 minutes. So in this first 3 hours, you're really spending a lot of time in this green here, which is your physical recovery. So cleaning out the toxins out of your cells, helping your muscles recover. Remember, your heart's a muscle, so this is a good thing. This is the time when your body is prioritizing physical recovery activities. The second half of your night, so your third, fourth, and fifth cycle, if you're lucky, is really primarily focused in this blue area, and that's your mental recovery. Now, if you look back at the previous slide, you see that what happens in those third, fourth, and fifth cycles is that you're in REM sleep, right? So REM sleep is associated with mental or psychological recovery. So it helps you filter through all of those emotions and things that you had during the day. What are positive things? What are negative things? How do you get them out of the way? And how do you wake up in the morning feeling not only physiologically refreshed, but psychologically refreshed as well? So getting all of this sleep in is really important for your overall functioning, health, well-being, happiness, and how you appear and work with others. So what are the processes that determine whether you're going to get deep sleep or not sleep? Why do we cycle in and out? Why don't we just fall in and stay and then come back up later? This is really driven by two different sleep drives. Of course, human bodies have to be very complex. They can't be simple, right? So human bodies are very complex. And even this process of sleep is actually driven by two different physiological processes that are going on within our bodies at the same time. So these two processes are known as process S and process C. So process S, depicted by this blue line here, is your sleep drive. And that is driven by how well did you sleep just previous to this, right? So how well did you sleep in the previous 24 hours? How much sleep did you get? And that's going to tell you how sleepy you feel, right? So you're going to feel more sleepy if you had less sleep the night before, and you're going to become naturally more sleepy as you move throughout the day, right? So the process S, though, in this graphic, in this line, is you have to think of sleep drive as getting less and less. So rather than your sleep drive getting higher, it's really dropping down, right? And so you're looking at the line here and you're saying, so the sleep drive is getting more and more and more up until about 11 p.m., right? Because you're getting sleepier and sleepier and sleepier throughout the day. And then at 11 p.m., you go to bed. So you start paying off that sleep debt and decreasing your sleep drive until around 7 o'clock in the morning when you naturally wake up, and then you start building that sleep debt or that sleep drive again as you move throughout the day, right? And it drops off again. Process C, on the other hand, is your circadian rhythm. So your circadian rhythm, rather than being driven by how well you slept in the last 24 hours, your circadian rhythm really doesn't care. Your circadian rhythm is driven by hormones, and your hormones are triggered by the amount of light that you receive through your eyes to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, cuts on or cuts off your melatonin in a simple way, or a simple description. So with process C, your circadian rhythm, is really about how awake do you feel. So when you have more melatonin circulating, you feel sleepier. It's your sleepy hormone. When you have less melatonin circulating, you feel more awake. What you'll notice here is you get more awake and more sleepy at different times necessarily during the day, but in some ways it is complementary. So you should feel more sleepy and you should have more melatonin circulating at about this time when you want to try to go to bed, ideally, because when you want to go to bed and you feel tired and you have melatonin circulating, that's going to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and maintain that sleep over time. The one thing that I don't like about this graph, of course, there's always a critique, right? The one thing I don't like about this graph is that it doesn't really depict the in the middle of the day slump where you feel a little sleepy right after lunch. A lot of times we will attribute that to we had lunch, and so now we've got this circulating blood sugar and we drop off and we feel sleepy, right? Some of that is congruent. However, some of it, on the other hand, is just your natural circadian rhythm that you feel a little bit of a dip in the middle of the afternoon and then you come back up. It also doesn't depict sometimes the jump that you get or you feel of that second wind in the next sequence or in the evening. So, like I said, no graphic is exactly perfect. So take it for the good that it is, and know that there's more information that may be slightly different than what you're experiencing. So on to the most common question I get. How much sleep do I really have to have? So I like to show this graphic because it's one that is created. It's been created now for a few years, since 2015 it was published. So it's been out there for a while, but it's really was the first attempt to try to show people not only how much minimal amount of sleep do you need, but what is the optimal functioning range, right? So like I said, when you wake up, you feel not only physiologically refreshed, but you feel psychologically refreshed so that you can do and be your best self as you move throughout the day. So in this particular graphic, it not only says, okay, what is the sort of best optimal range, but it also pulls it out by age, because we know that infants, newborns, are going to sleep more hours than, say, somebody who is 65, right? So why is that? And just, again, this slide or this recommendation by the National Sleep Foundation really shows you that there is a difference. It also shows you, I like, because this darker blue is sort of the average. We know an average is rarely something that applies to every single person because it's a statistical process and number, but we're really looking at, okay, do I fall in that typical average range, or do I need a little bit more or a little bit less than average? And that's still okay. So we've got the full range here that it's still okay. But once you start seeing babies, these infants, if they were actually sleeping 21, 22, 23 hours a day, obviously that's not going to work well for them. They're not even awake long enough to be able to get adequate nutrition to be able to stay alive, right? Similarly, if they're only sleeping 7, 8, 9 hours, they're not getting enough sleep to be able to do all of the work that they need to do to release growth hormone and to grow and to thrive. So outside of these ranges is where we start getting into not really a danger zone, but an area for concern that we might want to get a little bit more understanding. Similarly, if we have young adults that are only sleeping 3 or 4 hours, you can see that that's going to put them in a physiological and potentially psychological danger zone or area of concern, because they're not getting enough sleep to be able to function physiologically and psychologically well. If they're sleeping way too much, hypersomnia, again, we're going to be concerned. We're going to be wondering what's happening in there. Generally, when we start getting into the young adult, the adult, and the older adult, we're looking at things like insomnia that's not letting them get enough sleep, and things like obstructive sleep apnea or hypersomnia that is causing them to have to be in bed many more hours than they might be if the quality of their sleep was good. So it gives us, like I said, an area of concern that we want to look at things a little bit closer and see what's happening, to see what may need some tweaking in their sleep so that it can give them what they need in the hours of the day that they can be able to sleep well and function well when they wake up. So this is a slide that I really like to be able to show people and to help them to understand what the answer to that question, how much sleep do you really need? So I like to also show this slide because sleep deprivation, people, I talk about sleep deprivation a lot, and basically sleep deprivation means that you're not getting enough sleep yourself to be able to function your optimal way. So for some people, there's a small percentage of people genetically who can sleep less than 6 hours in a 24-hour period of time and be perfectly fine and function very well. They have no physiological side effects. They have no psychological side effects. That's only about 2 to 3% of the population. So most of the rest of us, myself included, need those 7.5 to 8 hours per 24-hour period of time to be able to function optimally. Can we function on less sleep than that? Yes, we can. Our body is amazingly adaptable. And in fact, if we just have a little bit of sleep debt, so if, say, last night I only got 6.5 hours instead of my 7.5 to 8 that I need because I was happily anxious to be able to provide this opportunity to talk with you all today, then that gives me a little bit of sleep debt, and it actually makes me a little bit more awake and a little bit more alert and a little bit more engaging than if I'd even had my full amount of sleep the night before. However, as you can see, it doesn't take long before that sleep debt can crush you, right? So what we do, most of us, through surveys that have shown, global surveys actually around the world, most of us are about where this poor guy is right here, carrying a fair amount of sleep debt that's really stressing us physiologically and psychologically and not allowing us to do and to contribute everything that we want to be able to do and contribute throughout our days. So just something to keep in mind, how much sleep debt are you carrying and how might you be able to get rid of it so that you can be your optimal self? So thinking about now, switching gears a little bit, if your sleep is not as good as you would like it to be, one of the things that we do is we try to think about what is going on in our own lives, external to us and internal to us, that may be disrupting our sleep. And I like this picture because there we are with our iPads and our other blue light emitting devices right there close to us. We get bored, we can't fall asleep, and then we go on our phones, right? Or we use our phones or our iPads or something like that to be able to read our Kindles before we go to bed. That in itself can be a disruptor. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So in general, sleep disruptors, we have physical, internal to us, right? Illnesses and treatments. If you have any kind of comorbidity, if you have cardiac issues, if you have lung issues, respiratory issues, all of this ragweed pollen that's floating around outside right now is making a lot of us snuffly and not being able to sleep as well because our sinuses are full and we've got that postnasal drip that's keeping us awake, right? So, but even more, if you say have asthma or COPD and you're receiving steroids, those treatments, it's going to affect your ability potentially to be able to sleep well at night. It could disrupt your sleep. Musculoskeletal, so if we have achy bones and muscles, And if we take any medications for that, or even if we don't, that could negatively affect your sleep. And gastrointestinal, if we have upset stomachs, if we have any kind of gastric reflux, and the treatments that we take for that could negatively affect your sleep. So the take-home message here is, if you have any chronic illnesses and if you're taking any treatments for them, make sure you talk with your physician or your nurse practitioner about, might these treatments, might this condition be impacting my ability to be able to fall asleep, stay asleep, and sleep well enough to be able to be my optimal self the next day? Or are there other treatments that I could take, or other times of day that I could take those treatments so that it has less of a negative impact on my ability to fall asleep, stay asleep, and function well the next day? Similarly, emotional and mental health issues can affect our sleep. We see a lot of what we call comorbidities between depression, schizophrenia, bipolar conditions, and sleep problems, right? It's oftentimes a particular portion of the diagnosis of these different kinds of conditions, as well as many more. These are just examples here that are highly linked with sleep problems. And in fact, the depression makes the sleep worse, and the sleep makes the depression worse. So it makes sense to be able to, again, reach out to your healthcare provider to be able to discuss these conditions, discuss the treatments that you're taking, and how is that influencing your sleep quality and or your ability to be able to function during the day. Because some of them can actually make you more sleepy during the day, so that you're napping and things like that, that's not letting you get your deep sleep at night. So worth a conversation. And then of course, everyday stressors, right? I think it's stress. Poor zebra here is losing his stripes. So everyday stressors are also going to impact your ability to be able to fall asleep, stay asleep, and get up and do what you want to do during the day and have enough energy to do that. So with everyday stressors though, we have a more direct way that we can address those, right? We can address those with different kinds of stress relief. Even just some of the elements like in the Strive for 5, where you're just doing a few minutes of thinking, a few minutes of meditation, getting out and moving around. All of those things help us to be able to feel less immediate stress. And even if you're doing that during the day, it helps when you try to go to bed at night that you're not carrying that stress with you throughout the day. So dropping a little bit of it off during the day all day long is a better way than carrying it with you to bed at night. Okay, so now lifestyle. So those things on the previous slide are not, I mean, they're somewhat responsive to actions that you can take, and somewhat we just have to deal with them, right? If you're in a situation where your life is just really stressful, you can't just send the teenagers away until they become responsible adults, right? That stress is still going to be there, and so you have to deal with it. They're not necessarily immediately modifiable to you. Things on this slide, however, are immediately modifiable to you and can actually result in significant improvements in the quality of sleep that you get. So we think about lifestyle first off. So timing, the timing of your sleep and when you're trying to sleep it is influenced by some of these kinds of things. So jet lag here, yes, there's the jet lag of flying from one end of the coast to the other, or one part of the world to the other, and changing time zones. But we actually give ourselves something on a frequent basis that has been phrased social jet lag. And what we mean by social jet lag is you may get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday, and go to bed around 9:30 or 10 at night, Monday through Friday. But by the time, well, Monday through Thursday, by the time you get to Friday and you've got some pregame things and you're planning for game day the next day, you're going to maybe stay up until midnight, right? So normally you go to bed around 10, you stay up till midnight, and Saturday you get to sleep in, so you don't get up at 6, you sleep in until 8. and you do the same thing. You sleep until 8, and then you stay up until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday night. And then you don't get up until 8 or 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. And then you don't go to bed until later. And then all of a sudden on Monday morning, you've got to get up at 6. Well, your body has experienced, by moving your wake up time and your sleep time by more than 2 hours, your body has experienced the same thing as if you flew from coast to coast, right? But only in a bad way. It's like, instead of flying from East Coast to West Coast where you're picking up time, you're flying from West Coast to East Coast, losing that time, losing those 3 hours. So you're waking up and you're starting your week off on Monday sleep deprived. And guess what? You're just building it and carrying it all week long. So you wonder why by the time you get to the end of the day on Monday, it's like, is it Friday yet? I'm tired. I'm already physically tired. So thinking about that social jet lag, it's okay to sleep in an extra hour. It's just not okay to sleep in an extra 2 hours. It's okay to stay up an extra hour, or occasionally to stay up an extra 2 hours. If you know you're going to plan on paying that off and getting back into your cycle, so that the next day you're not paying for the whole weekend of building up that debt. Exercise is interesting in that if you're doing light stretching exercises where you're not increasing your heart rate. So the key point here is, if you increase your heart rate, that means you're increasing your core body temperature in your body. When you increase your core body temperature, you cut off your melatonin, right? So if you do vigorous exercise in the first half of your day, it actually helps to set your circadian rhythm, to wake you up, to make you more energetic as you move throughout the day, and it will help you be able to fall asleep better at night. However, if you do that same exercise closer to bedtime, it does the same thing. It increases your melatonin, or it increases your core body temperature, cuts off your melatonin, and it prevents you from being able to fall asleep as well. So you want to make sure, if you're timing your exercise, you want to do it in the first half of your day. For some of you who work night shift, that might be at 8 p.m., right? For some of us, like myself, that I'm an early riser, I'm up at 5. I try to do my vigorous exercise first thing in the morning, right? Before 8 a.m. So I'm really trying to maximize the influence on those circadian hormones to wake me up, use this to wake you up at the right time of day, to set you up as you move throughout the day. Your work, when you work, your being able to stay on a regular schedule is actually much better than if you're doing shift work and flipping back and forth. If you're doing shift work, I do a whole conversation with people about how do you manage your life and your sleep within a shift work cycle. And so that's way beyond the scope of what we can do here, but just pay attention to that. If you're getting off cycle, or if you're flipping back and forth, it makes it really hard to manage and get that quality sleep, because your body doesn't know what is it supposed to be doing at this time of day, awake or asleep. Environment. So you're going to look at how much noise is in your environment. You're going to look at how much light is in your environment. How hot is it, or how cold is it? And are you sending mixed signals to your body and your mind? So noise, we want it to be quiet, but not necessarily silent. In this case, white noise or nonsensical noise is something that might actually be a good distractor and help you to be able to fall asleep. So it doesn't have to be silent, but it does need to be noise that is not something you would listen to during the day or when you're trying to be awake, because that's actually sending a mixed signal to your brain. If you're listening to things that you would normally listen to during the day, say your favorite podcast, right? At the same time, when you're trying to be awake as when you're trying to go to sleep, your body doesn't know, your mind doesn't know, am I supposed to stay awake and listen to this? Or is it okay for me to fall asleep? So you don't want to send those mixed signals. Light, this is something you need to be very careful about. It doesn't, again, need to be completely black out, stumbling over the furniture when you get up in the middle of the night, right? But it does need to be the spectrum of light that will not trigger your suprachiasmatic nucleus to cut off your melatonin, right? So when you get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and you walk into the bathroom, don't flip on those same overhead lights that you flip on to put on your makeup to look beautiful during the day, because what that does is that immediately cuts off your melatonin, and that's going to keep you awake longer. It's going to take you 15, 30, sometimes 60 minutes to get your melatonin up to a high enough level to allow you to fall back asleep again. So what can you do in the meantime? You don't want to be stumbling over the furniture, right? So what you can do is use red spectrum light. So you've heard about blue light. That's your bright blue, green, white to our eyes light. But if you have red, so those digital clocks that have red numbers, that light is within a spectrum that it doesn't cut off your melatonin as severely. So getting a night light so you can see where you're going, that is low light, that is a red light, that is an orange light. So think sunset, right? Sunset for when you're going to bed. Conversely, when you wake up in the morning, you do want to flip on those overhead lights because it does exactly what I said it does, right? It cuts off your melatonin, which wakes you up. So it actually helps to firmly set your circadian rhythm to say, okay, it's time to wake up. It's time to get started with the day. And it's actually as alerting, believe it or not, as having your first cup of coffee, right? So flipping on those lights first thing in the morning, as much as it's maybe difficult, is actually going to help you get started on your day and get your circadian rhythm going in the right direction. Temperature. Temperature is interesting because what you're trying to do with the temperature is you're trying to keep the room cool enough that it keeps your core body temperature low enough that it allows your melatonin to stay on. When your core body temperature spikes, your melatonin is cut off and you wake up. This is what happens with hot flashes for those of you women that are in my same age range, right? Wakes us up, and then what do we have to do? We have to do something to cool ourselves down to get sleepy again, and then we can go back to sleep, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep the room cool enough to keep our core body temperature low enough that will allow us to be able to fall asleep and stay asleep and not wake back up. However, the caveat here is you don't want it so cold that you're shivering, because if you shiver, then that's going to increase your core body temperature, right? So it's finding that sweet spot balance. Scientifically, they say the ideal temperature in a room is 68 degrees. However, if I had my room at 68 degrees, I would be shivering and my husband would be an icicle. So not 68 for us. For us, it's 74. We're from Texas previous to coming here, so 74 is nice and cool for us. So it's find that temperature range that's just right for you, and that'll help keep your core body temperature down, and it'll help you to be able to fall asleep and stay asleep. Okay, fundamental problem, right? Fundamental problems. You cannot force yourself to fall asleep. Okay? You have to get the conditions right and then let yourself fall asleep. Falling asleep every single day, every single night is the most actively passive thing you will do for the rest of your life. You have been doing it all of your life up to this point. And what that is, what I mean by that active, there are some things that you can do that we just talked about, right? To make the environment internally and externally conducive to you falling asleep. But the more you think about it, the more you worry about it, the more you try to make it happen, the less likely it is to happen. Because sleep is one of those things that is the most vulnerable state that you're in, right? Your eyes are closed. You don't hear as much. You don't feel as much. And so it's vulnerable in that if we were in a cave and a tiger was coming by, they would come by and they would eat us, right? Because we're vulnerable. So what we need to do is we need to tell our mind and our body that there are no tigers around here. It's safe. You don't need to worry about it. Everything's all cool, okay, and we can fall asleep, right? So it has to, you have to let it happen. The more you work at it, actually translates in your mind and your body to stress. You're trying to make something happen. So fundamentally, you can't force it. You have to let it happen, but you can set up your environment so that it's more conducive to you being able to achieve this goal of letting the sleep happen. So important for you to know your sleep-wake cycle. So this is your sleep-wake cycle. Actually, this should say wake, sleep, wake, right? Because we look at what happens to your wake and how does that influence your ability to sleep? And then how does the quality of your sleep influence your ability to wake and function during the day, right? So thinking about your particular cycle and what is it that's going on? What are you doing in the last 30 minutes right before bed? I would wager, if I was a betting person, that many of us have lives that are sort of like this, right? We're going, and then all of a sudden, oh, it's time for bed. You notice, I should have been in bed 30 minutes ago. Now I'm this jumbled up, hypersensitive person right here trying to go to bed. And then I rush and I get into bed and I lay down and I go, sleep, sleep. Guess what? I'm trying to make it happen. It's not going to happen, right? Because I'm so wired up and I'm so stressed. And what I need to be is calm and relaxed and safe and feel like this is okay for me to be vulnerable now. I can go to bed and I can relax. So thinking about what do you do in those 30 minutes, and I actually like to back it out to about 60 minutes before I go to bed, that helps me to understand if I'm incorporating things that will help me turn my melatonin on, help it get to the maximal level so that I feel sleepy and that when I go to bed, I can fall asleep within 5 to 15 minutes of hitting bed. So we talked a little bit about this. So setting up your environment, right? Cool and comfortable environment, reducing your noise, keeping your bedroom at a comfortable temperature, avoid eating, watching TV, studying, doing bills, any of the other things that you can think of that you normally do during your wake hours. You don't want to bring those to bed. Bed is for sleep and sex only. Sleep and sex only in bed, nothing else. No watching TV, no studying, no reading books, nothing else. You want to put the clock out of sight or at a minimum. And why I say this is because people will wake up and they look at the clock and they're like, oh my gosh, I've only been asleep for 2 hours. Now I'm stressed. Sleep, sleep, sleep. Again, you're trying to make it happen. It's not going to happen. So put it out of sight. Or if you're like me, what I do is I need to see how many hours left do I have to sleep. And so I have a digital clock that is red light. And I can glance at it and I see, oh, it's 3:30, right? 3:30, 4 o'clock. I wake up every morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock. And what I say to myself in my head is, oh, I've got 2 full sleep cycles left. I know that sounds strange, but that's what goes through my mind, right? 2 full sleep cycles left. And then I can fall right back to sleep. But if I don't see the clock and I don't see what time it is, then I go, I wonder what time it is. I wonder what time it is. I can look at it and then I'm okay. But some people, if they see the clock, it stresses them out. So then that's why I say, put it out of sight. Definitely do not pick up your phone and see what time it is, because guess what? That's giving you that light, cutting off your melatonin. It's going to take you 15 to 30 minutes to fall back to sleep. Don't work at going to sleep, right? I'm going to say that over and over and over again, because it's something we need to hear. Get into a routine. Your body likes to know what's going to happen and approximately when it's going to happen. So if you try to go to sleep when you're tired, which may or may not be the same time of day every day, right? But you try to get up about the same time every day, then your body is going to eventually start beginning to feel sleepy at about the same time every day. And so you want to be able to honor that and trust your body and go to sleep when it's telling you you need to go to sleep. Practice relaxing and calming activities. So like I said, backing it up 2 to 3 hours before you're getting ready for bed. You're practicing those activities, relaxation, calming your mind and your body, get moving early in the day, eat a light snack before bed. You really shouldn't eat your heaviest meal, starve yourself all day long and then eat your heaviest meal an hour before you go to bed. That's just carrying all of that in your gut, and your body's not going to be happy trying to manage that all night long. Write down your worries before you go to bed so you don't bring them to bed with you. Oftentimes people will say, I'm really calm until I go to bed, and then I remember all the stuff that I have to do the next day, or I think of all the things that I should have done today. If that happens, if your brain starts racing in that way, get up for a few minutes and write those things down. Because when you write them down, you can say, okay, that's for tomorrow. It's there, it's done. I can't do anything about it tonight, nor should I do anything about it tonight. I'm going to sleep well, I'm going to be fully rested, and I'm going to have more energy to tackle these things tomorrow, right? So writing them down sort of does a brain dump, and you can move on to doing the tasks that you're supposed to be doing right then, is going to sleep. So leaving it until tomorrow is a good way to think about it. Avoiding stimulants. So in this case, alcohol, I say within an hour of bedtime, right? Because it takes about an hour to get it out of your system. So you don't really want to, that is if you're drinking water and you're not binge drinking, right? So, but alcohol actually has a negative effect. It can make you feel sleepy, but it actually keeps you more alert throughout the night, and you don't get the deep sleep. And so you really want to make sure, if you're of age and if you can have a glass of wine, have it with dinner at least an hour before you go to bed. Start drinking water and then flush that out of your system so that it's not affecting your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. Avoiding caffeine 6 hours before bedtime. For people like me who are very sensitive to caffeine, I actually have to avoid it at least 12 hours before bedtime, right? So if I'm planning on going to bed at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, that means by 9 or 10 in the morning, that's my last cup of coffee if I have any at all, because I know how sensitive my body is to caffeine. And if you think you're not sensitive to caffeine, give it a shot, start reducing it, and you'll actually recognize how much deeper you're able to sleep when you cut that caffeine out, right? But that's okay. Again, energy drinks 6 to 10 hours before bedtime, depending on your sensitivity. And don't smoke at least an hour before bedtime. Smoking here, we're looking at nicotine and its ability to sort of wake you up. And we're also looking at the impact of bringing in the irritation in your respiratory system from smoking. So better to quit altogether. But if you are smoking, then it's better to try to avoid doing it at least an hour before bedtime. Relaxation. So I practice what I call mini meditation. It's actually not my term. It's a term that is out there. Mini meditation throughout the day. And that's really about breathing, taking just a couple of little minutes here and there to take some deep breaths, some abdominal breaths, let it out. It's amazing what happens. Your relaxation response kicks in, and it helps to reduce that stress as you move throughout the day. And again, doing any kind of positive activity that decreases your stress will help prevent you from carrying that load of stress to bed with you at night. So you want to do that and help you. Again, any healthy activity to escape. So I'm not promoting negative or unhealthy things. So in summary, exercise in your morning to get yourself woke up. No caffeine. So here, 5 to 8 hours before bed. It may also be even more depending on your sensitivity. Knowing your light sources, so bright light in the morning, sunset in the evenings, cool, quiet and dark environment to be able to sleep best. Establish your bedtime routine. So if you do the same thing in the same order every day, your body actually gets used to and feels comfortable that, okay, sleep is happening soon and it's time for me to go to sleep. Leave your stress outside of the bedroom. So write down your worries, write down your to-do list, leave it in the other room, put your phone in the other room, turn it on silent so you can't hear it, so that you're not bringing that stress in. Now, of course, if you need to have your phone there, you have your phone there for emergency reasons, but whenever you can reduce those stressors, it's better to take it outside and let your environment be one that is that sanctuary that they talk about on HGTV about creating this sanctuary to be able to relax and sleep in. So go in that direction. So here's our little advertisement for Sleep More, Stress Less. If it's something that hopefully you've learned from this particular webinar and something that you'd like to learn a little bit more about, and then start to begin to apply some of these principles to your own life so that you can sleep a little bit better. We have this 5-week program that does qualify for your benefits. And you will be able to meet with us. It's virtual. And so this is open now. It's called Sleep More, Stress Less. It's open now and you can register for that if it's something that you're interested in. And here is my contact information. Again, pcarter@ua.edu. I live over here in the College of Nursing. I love to talk with people about sleep and how they can get a better night's sleep. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you have questions, I believe we've got about another 10 minutes or so. If you have questions, you can drop them in the chat box and we will, Miranda and I will do our best to answer them for you. I'm going to stop sharing this screen so that I can